Welcome to the Bookers Alliance podcast, where we hold the pencil and the pencil is power. Coming at you right now is your host, Marky Mark, along with the man, the myth, the legend, Frank Donaldson. Join us as we discuss the ever-changing landscape of professional wrestling. So hang on tight, you jabronis, and enjoy the ride. All right, welcome in, everybody. Thank you for joining today's episode of the Bookers Alliance podcast. Pull yourself up a ringside seat, come on in, and listen to what we got to talk about today. Frank, how we doing, man?
Oh, we're doing good. I'm thankful to have the podcast here to talk about and have wrestling going on because there's no other sports on TV for me right now. So we're outside of the basketball season, the football season's been gone. So, we're actually on the closer end of it restarting again. And I'm not a baseball fan, so I've had nothing going on here, but luckily now we're getting 6 nights a week of wrestling.
Yeah.
So I'm getting my fill of all the wrestling I can intake. So it gives us a lot to talk about on these podcasts.
Yeah, we went from a couple years ago of having a dry sink to an overflowing faucet now. So
yeah. Because the cup runneth over.
It does. But hey, what a time to be a wrestling fan, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm not complaining about it. Like you said, I don't have anything else to watch because there's nothing good on TV right now anyway. So thank God that there's wrestling every night for a couple hours that I can sit back in and enjoy. And damned if it doesn't give us enough to talk about on the podcast.
Absolutely. So
double-edged sword there we're winning with.
So today's episode title is Et Tu Jey Uso.
Et Tu Jey Uso, the fall of the bloodline.
The fall of the bloodline. So
Jey was at last holding out hope. He was set to be the next tribal chief. And he said, you know what? Nope. and here we are.
Yeah, so let's kind of rewind a little bit and let's talk about the beginning of the end, as we say. So the first kind of crumble, the beginning of the end was Sammy.
That was the crack in the foundation there. When Sammy, they were so strong up till, let's say, the start of the year, right? Up until January 2023, the Bloodline was as strong as any other faction had been. And, and then Sammy with the chair shot to the back, that put the first crack in the foundation. It started weakening that structure that we had established. And from there, it just, like you said, it just started to chip away. And here we are.
Sammy, kind of, he as Popeye would say, I took all I could stand and I couldn't stand no more.
Can't stand no more. It's a recurring theme throughout the end of the Bloodline is just Roman's, he's crazy with power. He's drunk with power, as they say. He's treating everybody bad, disrespecting everybody, because he's the head of the table. And this is an age-old story. We were talking beforehand about, old literature and things like that. This is an age-old story. Whenever the king comes to power, inevitably that power goes to his head. And, not every king can control it. You just get drunk with power. And before you know it, you're exerting that power over everybody. And not everybody's going to sit around and just take that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened with Sammy. And Sammy kind of, he said, I can't do it no more. I got to go out. And then, he was looking at Jey and Jimmy going, do you guys not see this?
Yeah, well, the story. They sent Sammy out. They sent Sammy as an assassin after KO. And that was his lifelong friend. And he refused to turn on him. So what did he do? He backstabbed Roman Reigns. He stabbed him in the back with a chair shot and said, I refuse to turn on my friend. I won't do it. And he defected. He bolted. He said, I'm out of here.
Yeah. And when all of that kind of went down and how that all happened, was it Elimination Chamber, right?
Yeah.
When that all happened, we kind of looked at that and we said, man, they had a pay-per-view caliber match right there as the main event, but the story is what main evented that pay-per-view.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's main evented every pay-per-view since then.
Absolutely.
Because and I don't think anybody would argue this point now. This is the best storytelling we've had in wrestling in decades.
I'm gonna go on record as saying probably hot, hot topic, hot opinion, hot take, whatever you want to call it. This might be my favorite story that I've ever sit and watched.
Yeah.
As far as wrestling.
So I think I've heard it said that this is definitely the best storytelling since Austin McMahon.
Yeah.
And I mean, that spans us back 25 years.
Yep.
I might even go as far as to say this may be the best storytelling since Hogan and Macho Man, the whole Mega Powers, because that was a year-long story that kind of never ended. They kept that going, through the next SummerSlam and through the whole Zeus thing. And, they kept that story going much longer than the 2 WrestleManias that they main evented. But I think a lot of people forget about the rest of it. They kind of remember the main event of WrestleMania 4, then the whole SummerSlam tag team and that. Then most people kind of think it was over after WrestleMania 5, when Hogan won the belt back. But the story didn't end there. I mean, it wasn't even close to ending there. They stretched it on almost another year, when Zeus came in and then Macho tagged with Zeus. They main evented SummerSlam and, they went into Survivor Series still telling the same story, not with Macho Man anymore, but at that point they had kind of spawned it over to Zeus. But I mean, that was the very first long-term story in the modern era of wrestling, in the Hogan era of wrestling, at least. That was the longest story that they had told up to that point, and they never really could catch that lightning in a bottle again until they ran into Austin McMahon. I mean, and I don't think they knew what they had when they started the Austin McMahon thing. I don't think so either. I think the fans just told them what they had and said, hey, don't take this away from us. You keep giving this to us. And luckily they played into it. And that's kind of where we're at now. When they started this whole Bloodline thing, if you remember it, they kind of stumbled into this too. It really was just Paul and Roman.
It was pandemic era when it kind of started.
Yeah, it was Paul and Roman when it started. The Bloodline wasn't really involved at all at first. Then towards the end of that year, they started teasing the Jey against Roman thing. And then we know how the whole story went from there. But I mean, as far as long-term storytelling, we haven't gotten this from the WWE in over 20 years. So the fact that they're doing it to the level that they're doing it now speaks volumes to the characters involved, because this isn't a creative decision. Right. This isn't a creative deal. This is a lot of Roman. This is a whole lot of Paul Heyman.
Yep.
And this is a lot of the Usos just, being who they are and bringing their personal vendettas and their personal past into a storyline to make it top quality.
Yep, and I don't know if anybody has caught the interview yet that the Usos had with Ariel Helwani, but the question was asked about acting. And, have you guys taken any acting lessons and all of this stuff? And they both said no. We get the script about, 30 minutes before the show, and then we go out there and we do it live.
Yeah.
And Ariel was like, really? It's that quick? And he's like, yeah. He's like, Jey even said he had a conversation with Hugh Jackman.
Okay.
And because Hugh Jackman's a huge fan of the sport Wolverine, and he's a huge
Former general manager of Raw at
right.
one point in time.
But he said, hey, you guys taking acting lessons, and stuff like this, right? And he's like, no, we've not done this. He's like, wait a minute, you guys are getting the script, going out there, and then performing this in front of a live crowd. Mm-hmm. He's like, do you realize how hard that is to do?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've got a huge, big-name professional actor giving them props right now about what they're pulling off. And I'm just lucky and blessed to be alive to see it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but I think a lot of that plays into what we were just saying. This is personal for them. They're not playing characters at this point. They are able to get the freedom to just go out there and expand on their own personalities, basically build their own character up. And it kind of plays into what Jey Uso said last week, not in reference to what we're talking about now, but what he said was when he was arguing with Jimmy right before he decided to defect, he said it was all because of him, pointing to Roman Reigns. That is what this is all because of, because he earned that freedom to be able to go out here and do his program. They're benefiting in tenfold because of it, because they have all these personal feelings that they've had for 20 years with each other.
Right. Now
they're able to just go out there and communicate it. And that's why it feels so organic. That's why the Austin McMahon thing felt so organic, because they had, beef with, Austin was a rebel against authority, and Vince had he had been a long-term boss of wrestling by that point. That's why the Mega Powers exploding was such a great storyline, because it was organic. Everybody knows, I mean, there's 30 to 40 years worth of documented history of the beef between Hogan and Savage. I mean, they're the epitome of good friends, better enemies. When those guys ain't getting along, it makes for some good TV.
Yep.
Same thing now, when the Bloodline was going strong together, you're like, yeah, that's a family unit. I can relate to that. I'm strong with my brothers. I'm strong with my cousins. I can completely relate. But then when you start to see, hey, he was always the chosen one. He was always the MVP. He was always prom king, whatever the case may be. They've referenced them all. You start to see, like, as you were growing up, you felt that. You may not have communicated that at that point.
Right.
Because, as a 18-year-old, when your cousin's named, MVP of the school or whatnot, you're not going to hate on him. You're going to be like, yeah, that's my cousin. Besides, he's a couple years older than you. You're getting a rub off of him. He's a senior. He's a big man on campus. You're a sophomore, a junior. You're happy to be walking shoulder to shoulder with this guy because now you're getting
the rub.
Yeah, you're the rub, literally, figuratively, and a lot of different ways you could take that. But then, then when Roman would go on and leave, then they talked about, Jay and Jimmy had the same thing where Jimmy was prom king and he was the football captain. And now you got Jay looking at it like, I'm always the run of the group. I'm always on the outs. So you still got that story coming from him. And I think that's why his character is the one to excel right now. I think that's why Jay's breaking out of his shell further than everybody else because A, he had more shell to break out of than Roman. And B, he's got more, I guess you want to call it animosity, even though it's not hatred animosity, but it's still animosity, between him, Roman, and his brother, because he was always the odd man out. When those guys were getting all these accolades, he was just kind of you're second best guy. Well, now he's ready to say, you know what? I ain't second best. I'm just as good, if not better than all of y'all, and I'm here willing to show it to you. And to top it all off, the cherry on the top, he's got such a given cousin, main eventer Roman Reigns, who was willing to lay down and take that pin for Jay. Right. I mean, if there's any better way to, build a guy up, they found it. They nailed it. And because of their family bond, they were able to do business that way. You think Hogan would have laid down for Bret Hitman Hart when he was part of the Hart Foundation?
That don't work for me, brother.
No, it didn't work. Didn't work for him when Hart was a main eventer. Nope. You think Hogan would have laid them shoulders down when Shawn Michaels was part of the Rockers?
That definitely don't work for me,
Definitely don't work. Hogan didn't lay them shoulders down for Shawn Michaels 20 years later when he was a main eventer. So, I mean, there you go. Main event guys don't do that unless they know the next guy's ready or, they're invested in that guy's future. And luckily, Roman's set for both.
So let's talk about these brothers real quick. So Sammy was excommunicated from the group, basically. Yeah, Jimmy defected from the group.
Yep. Jimmy said, I'm done with this.
He
kicked his way right out of the group.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of happened maybe not so accidentally, but accidentally at the same time. It just kind of came out when he was in a promo. And then all of a sudden, Jay looked at him like, man, I know.
What did you just say?
What did you just say? I know you didn't say that you're the tribal chief.
Yeah, But again, those emotions. It didn't look like it was scripted because it looked like Jay and Jimmy were feeling the way that they were talking. I mean, in that particular promo, when Jimmy was getting all hyped up and he said, you know what? Right now, I'm the tribal chief.
Yep.
You can see in his heart that he's like, right now, I am the man because this is my promo segment and I'm going to own it.
And the person that I loved to watch the most during that bit was Paul Heyman.
Ah, yeah.
All right, so
Paul's facials and
so we'll talk about something real quick. Sidebar conversation. We talked about earlier before we started this episode that I'm kind of a literary nerd. I'm a movie nerd. You give me a story, you've hooked me. As long as it's a good story, I'm going to watch it to the end.
Yep.
One of my favorite movies is Braveheart.
Okay.
There's a scene in Braveheart where William Wallace is betrayed by Robert the Bruce.
Okay.
There is no dialogue in this scene whatsoever except the expressions on Robert and William's face.
Okay.
That's the whole scene. As soon as William Wallace has realized I've been betrayed, and I've been betrayed by the guy who is supposed to be at my shield.
Right-hand man.
Right-hand man.
Right-hand man.
And when you could just see it in Mel Gibson, whatever he has done in his life, whatever, that's besides the point. Just talking about his acting in that movie.
Yeah.
the way he came across in his eyes, I will never forget that, because to me, it's like, oh crap, I'm really behind it now. And I don't know what's about to unfold. Paul had that same look.
Yeah.
When Jimmy said that, Paul was like, oh God, I did not expect this to come out.
I didn't see this coming. What are we doing?
What are we going to do now? How is this all going to unfold? How do we get back to where we're a strong unit? Can it be put back together?
Yeah.
Paul had just all of that emotion was just right there on his face.
And the flip side of that, so while Paul was showing all that facial recognitions type, you got Solo standing over on the side who's just stoic as all. I mean, so whoever gave Solo his marching orders to say, go out there and be stoic, damn, he's nailing it. I mean,
100%.
We've seen every aspect that we could possibly see up to this point. And Solo's expression never changes. The only time his facial expression has changed, well, no, there's been a couple of times. The first time it happened was when the double super kick to Roman came. Mm-hmm. The second time, we'll get to it a little bit later, but of course the second time was when they told Solo that, he might be the next tribal chief. And Roman found that completely hilarious, and Solo kind of looked at him as if to say, "What are you laughing at?"
What are you laughing at?
But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
But yeah, Solo, the way that he has portrayed his role in all of this, he doesn't say much, but when he speaks, you perk up. You're like, whoa, what's he got to say? He's about to say something.
I think I'm on the lines of Hugh Jackman though. I don't know out there in American Samoa. I don't know who's teaching acting classes out there, but maybe it's The Rock. I mean, maybe he's going out there doing acting on the weekends, or whoever the hell it is. Though they got some prodigies on their hands right now, because these guys are nailing it.
Yep.
If they don't have acting credentials, they need to look into it like ASAP.
Yep. So Jimmy defected and Jey betrayed.
Jey betrayed. So, he was put in a tight spot. He was being squeezed on both ends. You got your tribal chief, and then you got your twin brother. Mm-hmm. Both are looking at you like, you got to make a decision, because we can't do this. And he was trying to, again, literary. He was trying to be Benvolio at some point. Yeah, he was trying to mend the fences.
He was trying to be the peacemaker.
He wanted to keep everybody together. But Jey had a real interesting story arc in that time frame, where he kind of said, I'll stay in, but Paul has to go.
Yep.
And they haven't really played into that just yet. They haven't really addressed that. That kind of just happened and it's been forgotten about. They haven't really gotten into that, but I think there's still more story to that.
Which makes
the fact that he would have stayed, everything would be as it was if Roman would have gotten rid of Paul. What would the benefit be to Jey Uso to get rid of Paul?
He's got dirt on Paul that he's not brought to the surface yet.
There's still more to that story that hadn't been scratched yet. And I feel like because this story definitely has multiple layers. I mean, this is an onion and a half. So we've got a lot of layers to peel back. And I think we're only on like maybe the third or fourth rung.
So some of these layers too are very inconspicuous.
Yep. You just got to really be paying attention.
Just like a lot of people pointed out, the belts Paul has been carrying around sometimes don't have the right side plates on.
I know, yeah. He definitely, this whole past weekend, he had Brock's side
plates on there.
Which, to me, I just think the wise man forgot the belt at home and they went and grabbed a replica that they were carrying around in the truck.
Could be a wrinkle in the story, though. Maybe that's the dirt that Jey has on Paul. Maybe we don't know that yet.
Could be. That definitely could be an avenue that they travel down. Because he's not carrying. I mean, the only other character that Paul's worked with is an entirety of the WWE of note is Brock Lesnar. So the fact that he's carrying a Brock belt around, that definitely could be. They need to do something with that black belt. Let's not go off the reservation again on that. But they definitely need to figure out a way to get that damn black belt off TV. So that's something.
And we'll sidebar conversation just for a few seconds. I don't think the black belt's going anywhere.
I
think as soon as Roman gets pinned, the gold belt goes away.
Ugh.
I think that's what's going to happen.
That's such a waste.
Yeah.
They've ruined that. There's no coming back from that.
And I think
that whole thing's bad.
the gold belt goes away, the blue universal belt goes away, and the black WWE belt comes back.
Well, then let me ask you. So let's say Asuka gets pinned in with her upcoming potential match against Bianca and Charlotte. If Asuka gets pinned, do they give Bianca the blue belt, give Charlotte the red belt, and then give Asuka the gold belt, or how do they remedy that situation?
They need to take a Sharpie and mark out the word undisputed on that.
Well,
belt.
hopefully they got another belt sitting in the back waiting to go for that. 'Cause that was an error in judgment.
Agreed.
Right there. But
so let's get back on topic.
Yeah, but we digress. We won't go down that path again today.
We'll get back on topic here. So all of this that has happened has kind of led us up to the Civil War, which transpired at Money in the Bank. If you haven't seen Money in the Bank yet, what are you waiting on? I mean, good God, what an
At this
event.
point now, you should be, as soon as you end this podcast, go ahead and finish this episode. But as soon as you finish this episode, fire up your old Peacock and check out Money in the Bank, because my goodness, that was a pay-per-view and a half.
That was a banger.
Yeah. You got your $5 worth out of that.
Absolutely.
That's for sure.
So we saw the Civil War match. We saw kind of how it was unfolding. You saw Roman kind of break there towards the end of it, and he actually broke enough to where Solo felt the need to kind of say, okay, I got to take over and drive.
Yeah.
My tribal chief is so out of sorts right now.
Roman was done. Roman was done. He was laying down to get pinned. Solo had to come in and save the event, which is also another branch of the story that they can eventually travel into. Because leading into the Civil War, after Jimmy and Jay both were gone, they kind of teased that neither one of them want to be tribal chief either. They would actually prefer to follow their younger brother Solo into battle and him be the tribal chief.
So Solo,
they brought it up to Roman, and Roman's reaction again, like we mentioned, he just kind of laughed it off like it was a joke.
Right.
And Solo didn't take too kind to that.
Solo is the warrior.
Yeah.
He there's no politics in Solo.
No, he's there. He's their enforcer.
He's the enforcer. He's the warrior. He's the samurai, if you will.
Yeah.
He is the one that you say go, and he's already there before you even say go. Like he's already done it.
He's let me take care of your light work kind of guy. He's the cleanup guy. Went out there and made a whole mess out of everything. He's gonna clean it all up. And I mean, he plays that role, the silent but deadly type. He plays that role to a T, which works for him because, again, he's the youngest of all of them. Yep. He's definitely a younger talent. He hasn't been in the business half as long as any of these other guys. So he's not going to be as polished on the mic. He's not going to have these acting skills that we're talking about that the other guys possess. But the character type that you've put him into, it hides any inadequacies he may have, but it accentuates all the positives that he brings to the table. His look, his demeanor, even the week going into Civil War where Roman wasn't on the event and Solo was just, mad and angry in the back and he took out Ridge Holland. That was it. And then he came out and said, I did it for Big E, like his father. Oh, no. Rikishi did it for The Rock. Look, and so, but yeah, I digress again. We're back way off topic here. But nonetheless, I mean, that's just the character the perfect character that they could create for Solo. And I mean, even him, it puts everybody in the perfect character for what their strengths are.
So when Solo, though, when he kicked in and said, okay, I got to drive the ship now because Roman's broke down, he crashed and burned. He tried his best, but it crashed and burned. And what a spectacular crash and burn it was. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we find ourselves in a situation where Roman got pinned for the first time in over 3 years.
Yep.
And he got pinned clean.
Yep. You know what? That was the first time in over 3 years he didn't have anybody around to have his back, too.
Well, I'm going to take something back. I don't know if it was clean because that dirty kick out.
So Roman's done that before, too. Right. So, I mean, that was just...
All is fair in standards and practices.
Exactly. Right? That was just how do they say the rooster coming back to the hen house. That was just desserts coming around then. But
to see
that wasn't the pin. The actual 1, 2, 3.
Right.
Like you said, that was clean.
That was clean. Yep.
Roman hadn't taken any pinfalls in 3 years. Even the one leading into the last one he took against Baron Corbin way back in 2019.
Yep.
The end of 2019. That wasn't clean. I mean, it came after multiple chair shots. And then he took a fall. God, the Baron Corbin. I mean, oh my God. I'm sure at that point in time, Roman probably thought, he's like, damn, this is all over for me. I'm on the downtrodden here. But little did we know, COVID came, and resurrected his career.
But so after the Civil War, we're kind of moving into the end game now, so to speak, for the Bloodline.
Now we're in the end
game. And so we're going to talk about how we are sifting through the ashes here. You know, what is left of the Bloodline? Is there going to be a continuation of this story? Is this where this ends? Is this Roman's final stand as tribal chief? What are we going to see? What do you think?
Well, I mean, what'd you just say? We're sifting through the ashes right now. Well, what do they say? From the ashes shall rise a strong phoenix. And I believe that Roman's going to be that mighty phoenix to ascend from these ashes, just because his story is nowhere near over. I mean,
I like that.
So much Roman left to tell. Whether it's his, just think, in all this time that he's been going through all these feuds, the KOs, the Sammys, the Drew McIntyres, the Brocks, the everybody, we've always had that underlying story of the Bloodline. Now we're finally dealing with the Bloodline storyline. And we've been dealing with that for about a year. Let's be honest. He's had opponents in that year, but that storyline's always, even when he fought Cody at WrestleMania, the bigger storyline, probably the more important storyline, was Sammy defecting at that point.
Right.
And that kind of overshadowed the whole Cody Roman thing. So let's just use an example. Let's say SummerSlam, they have a Jey versus Roman one-on-one match, right? You're definitely not going to end it there.
No.
There's enough Anoa'i's and Fatu's and other family members that they could roll this into Survivor Series if they wanted to. But I don't necessarily think they have to go that way. At this point, they could probably get, let's say, SummerSlam and the next pay-per-view out of this, as it is right now, this iteration of the Bloodline. What you can do after that is now you've developed a whole new crop of contenders for that undisputed world title that Roman's carrying.
Yep.
Now he can start wrestling some of the guys that have come up in the ranks recently, and he could kind of get away from the Bloodline for a little bit.
Yeah.
He can leave that be for a little while. He can actually go defend his title, on a semi-regular basis against natural contenders. And you can always start another Bloodline, another branch of the Bloodline storyline. Or you just have a Roman and Paul story go on, with Solo. Or Solo defects. I mean, Solo could break off. Let's say Solo breaks off. You could roll that into the Royal Rumble. I mean, you could, depending on how you tell the story, how drawn out, you can roll it into WrestleMania, for God's sake. I mean, it doesn't have to be over, but the value of a Roman Reigns character where he is now, if it's over, there's a lot more equity in Roman Reigns. If it's not over, there's a lot more equity in the Bloodline storyline.
Right.
I mean, so pulling the title off of him is a definite no-go. You can't do that, but you don't even have to end the Bloodline storyline. You can put it on temporary pause and go have great storylines with a whole new cast of characters on SmackDown, or you can keep going with the Bloodline storyline and tell more facets of the story. I mean, again, to repeat what you started off with, it's a great time to be a wrestling fan. Absolutely, with a storyline like this going on.
Yeah, it's just so many branches, so many trees, so much that you can go to, and maybe there's stuff out there that's in the works we wouldn't even think about.
Yeah, Jacob Fatu could have a call sitting on, he could have a letter sitting on his desk right now saying, whenever you're ready, finish on up where you're at and come on down. You just don't know. I mean,
but yeah, so that is kind of where we are. What a great story to experience as a fan. Just sitting here watching this masterpiece kind of unfold. It's masterpiece theater.
Absolutely.
It's beautiful and
it's compelling television. Yep. It's almost Emmy worthy. If there could be a way to get into, I know the writers are on a hiatus right now. They're on strike. The actors are potentially going on strike. But I mean, we're still getting quality television every week on out of this Bloodline storyline. So the writers better keep that in mind when they're, when they're out there striking that, hey, there's some writers working and they're making some pretty good TV right now.
Yep. And so speaking of pretty good TV, we're making a pretty good podcast. Don't you think they're fun?
I believe so. I mean,
Absolutely.
We're 30 some episodes in, we're still on our maiden voyage. We're still 6 months into our first attempt at a podcast ever. So I feel like we're putting out good quality content. Our listenership is coming up. So I mean, I think we're probably like third or fourth in, rated of all podcasts, not amongst listeners, just among quality. But and I don't know who judges all that, but they're biased. So if they're not showing us rated third or fourth by now, then that's just a bias. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. So we appreciate everybody that's listening to our podcast. Thank you for taking the time. Reach out there on our social media platforms. Drop us a line. We'll chat with you and we'll talk about whatever, the podcast episode was about, or, maybe give us some ideas. We're always willing to chat it up with the fans. But thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. And with that, we bid you adieu.
Peace.
Today's podcast was produced by SBP. You can find our podcast on all major podcast platforms. Also connect with us on our social media accounts. Search for The Bookers Alliance on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.